want to explore a little model that I put together here today that I'm kind of jazzed about, because I'm going to show it, and then you're going to say, no way, and I'm going to say, way, and you're going to say, no way. It'll degenerate from there. Anyway, so what we've got is we've got an irregular wall, or a form that's kind of wall-like, drawn here in Vasari. You can also do the same thing in Revit. It has one edge that goes in one direction on the bottom, another edge that goes in another direction on the bottom. And what I've got here is a family that actually goes and essentially slices this up into pieces and then re-represents these pieces down here so that you can cut them out. It's essentially slicing this up and giving you a template by which you can reconstruct this whole wall using those profiles. And so just to sort of demonstrate how this works, if I go in and I'm going to find a point in here that I can grab onto. Yeah, where are my points? There's one. And so I'm just going to start deforming this guy. And see these slices which sort of originate from these points and sort of pass a plane through here are now going to get represented over here. So this guy right here, you can see is now highlighting this slice right here. And if I go and I hide, well, I can go wireframe for a second, and you can see that I've got, each one of these guys is represented by another slice over here. I'm going to get into a little bit about how this works, but it's using just out-of-the-box functionality with adaptive components and curtain panels. So if I take one of these guys and I open it up, I'm just going to select this. So actually it's a curtain panel family. I'm going to edit it. One moment while it opens. And what it is it's a hexagonal curtain panel family. And I'm just going to reset all the points to the grid. And so you can see here, if I hit top, we've got a hexagonal curtain panel, and it has a bunch of weird stuff going on here. So first of all, we've got this yellow form. And if I just window tile, you can see where each one of these pieces is showing up. So I'm going to just select my wall and I'm going to hide it for a second. So these yellow guys are these pieces right here. And this is point 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's point, let's see, where's my point 1? There's point 1, then 2 is on the bottom, 3, 4, and then 5 and 6 are over here. So what's happening is I'm placing point 1, 2, 3, 4 on the wall, and they're getting hosted on that wall section. And then I'm taking measurements between point 1 and 2, between point 2 and 3 and 4, and I've got a reporting parameter hooked up between each one of them. So I know the distance between point 1 and 2, and I know the angular relationship between the line that's created between point 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. Now over here I'm representing those same relationships. So I have a parameter here that is driving the distance between this point and this point, and that point is the same as, and that distance, that is the same as, let's see, over here I've got let's see, it's this guy, which is 11 feet, and this guy, which is 11 feet. And if I look at my parameters, you can see I've got test L4, which is the number that I've given for that parameter, is driven by a reporting parameter. And what that means is that for every distance over here, I am making a duplicate length over here. And for every angle over here, I'm having a duplicate angle over here, which means that wherever I place these 4 points, boing, 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 it's going to make a flat representation of that same shape in a different place. So this is very similar, or this is actually exactly the same as the projection pattern that I've talked about earlier, where you're just taking one set of geometry and you're transposing it to a different place, which is essentially what unfolding is, or slicing is. And then just a couple other details on this. Once I've been able to represent this geometry in a different place, that is, I have that geometry placed over here, and then I just represent that same profile in a different place. I just take those same measurements and I just measure them out in a different place. I need some way to sort of push them away from the geometry itself. So here I have two other measurements, an X and a Y essentially. And these are the other 2 points that are associated with the hexagonal panel. And what I've done is I'm driving this geometry away from my curtain panel by just hosting, let's see, so I'm hosting point 5 on another point, and that allows me to just push the geometry away. So with that in mind, let's just go through the process of taking this one curtain panel and placing it into a project. I'm just going to pause for a second while I set that up. So here I've got my little wall section, and I've got a line on a point, and I have just one free point out here. So I've got my measure panel that I just talked about and loaded into this project. I'm going to take it out, and I'm just going to, and you can see it's just a sort of jumble of weirdness. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to host it on the edges of this guy. That's point 1, I just placed, and point 2. Keep pivoting around, point 3, point 4, and now 5 is just going to go on this free point, and 6 is going to go over on this guy. Alright, so we can start to see what's happening here. I've got my geometry, which is basically tracing out my host form, and I have the beginning representation of that form. Now, one problem is that right now these guys are not all plane, they're not a planar slice. I just sort of slap them down. So what I need to do is I need to get them to all line up, and that's what I'm going to use this work plane for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select point 4, and I'm going to host it by the intersection with this plane. Bam. Like that. And you see it just lined up. And what we can see that that does is that that plane is creating an intersection point with the line that that point is hosted on, and that point is going to lie at the intersection of those 2 planes, or that plane and that line, more properly said. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to do that a couple more times. Host point by intersection, bam, and this guy over here, host by intersection, da-da, and last one, host point by intersection, shabam. So now what I've got is I've got a plane slicing through my regular geometry and creating its representation over here. Now, as I move this point sort of closer and farther away, it allows me to sort of control the placement of where this guy is. This flat representation of this slice is actually hosted on a work plane of this point. So you can see that, you know, if I take this guy and I move it up and down, this guy's going to move with him. So it just gives me a handy way to sort of control my layout here. So now I've got one of these. Big deal. How do I get more of them? So I'm going to select this geometry, and I'm going to select that point that it's hosted on, and I'm just holding down Control and I'm dragging. And you can see that each one of these guys is creating a brand new slice through my geometry. And then I can just go and, you know, just using some other sort of standard tools, I'm just going to identify the work plane here. I'm going to do a little equality constraint so that all of my points are equidistant from each other, like so. And now it's just going to think about that for a second while it straightens itself out. And so you can see now I've got each one of these guys nicely spaced from each other and arranged as a projection basically from this point along those guys. So I'm going to post these files so you can look through them. Skeptics can go in and measure things to make sure that they're all lining up. But the big thing is that it's just really fun to sort of play with these now. So I'm going to stretch that out and make my wall into a different configuration and watch my guys sort of reconfigure. now I've got, you know, this guy, they started to overlap, but I've put controls into it too, so that, oops, remember how we had these two parameters pushing this away from the base point? Well, I can also control what that spacing is. So if I go and I edit the type, I've got an X and a Y multiplier that basically says I want each one of these to be 3 times X apart. And I can never remember which one is which, but let's try that. I just changed it from 2X to 3X. And yeah, so there we go. So now I've just pushed these guys aside. So now there's enough space. So if I wanted to go in and, you know, go out and laser cut these or whatever fabrication method I wanted, I can go and I can slice out these pieces, and I'll know that if I line them up and I set them out next to each other, they will just start to describe this base form, so I can start building it in a different context. Anyway, download the file, play around with it, and I hope this is remotely useful for people, or at least some fun. Thanks for watching.